Well, I've basically decided to build a new worm farm. As you can see, I picked up a bathtub from a renovation, advertised it, and somebody said, yeah, take it away, which is great. It's in the position where my old black plastic worm farm was, which I've popped over there for the moment. My other wicking beds, which need revitalising. Potatoes down there, doing quite nicely. Let's see, that one's blank, that one's got ginger in it. I've got to see how that does. And I've got some chilies there which haven't done really well. It's the wrong time of the year, really. See how they go later on. But with this one, put it on a frame so it's got a nice drain as would normally. So you can pop, give me a bit close, pop a bucket in underneath there. I'm going to fill it with a mixture of horse manure and some compost, and with quite a few worm bits and pieces. I had an excellent boost from some dried worm food that I mixed with RobBob's directions, which is great. And if you dig down here, you see, with my fingers, hundreds of the regular, hundreds, lots and lots and lots of tiny, tiny baby worms, and I love the paper as well in there. So very happy with that lot. The yellow stuff is basically a load of lupin seeds that I was going to make some falafels out of, but they went too far, they sprouted, so whizzed them down in the Thermomix and give them the worms, and they quite like them too. Very high protein. Yeah, the black plastic one got way too hot last year, and unfortunately in the sunshine, I lost 2 lots of worms. Resupplied it this winter, and it's doing nicely, so I'm going to get some casts from that one and some wormweed too. But they'll be used, as I said, to populate this one, which is underneath my grapefruit tree and in full shade 99% of the day. That's going to be part of the worm culture I'll be doing. I've popped some old screen mesh over the plug hole. I've checked the fall line with some water and it goes nicely through there. The mesh has been siliconed in place for the moment too. Okay, I've loaded up the bathtub with a load of building rubble, and that will be covered with some weed mat to stop the compost mingling with the rubble. But it'll also let the worms climb up the outside so they won't be sealed in any way. Once I put the horse manure, some mushroom compost, and of course the refugees from my old compost bin in it, and hopefully that will happen later on today. This first barrow load of mushroom compost, I'm going to drag some of the unrotted horse manure that's on the top of that bed behind it to put on top of that, because it's not going into the ground, it's just laying there on the dry. It's been there for a few months now without rotting away, so I'm sure the worms will like it. And I'll put some more cool mushroom compost on this as well. It's completely cooled down, there's no heat in there anymore. And then the worms on top of that. Okay, it's been a few days since the last update. I've just leveled the bases so it's horizontal in all ways, and it's got a natural drain towards the old plug hole, which of course has been covered with fly screen mesh. Now I've got my old black multi-layer worm bin, which has absolutely been going fabulously, but I need more. A shed load of tiny juvenile worms. Right, I'm going to turn it over and get everybody out just to see what's going on. Right, worms everywhere. Nice, good quality worms. So I'll basically root through this lot and let them basically make the new home in a big pile of horse manure and some powdered feed made from leftover oats, rice, some lupin seeds, very high protein. I should do working well. Basically going to top it up with food at that end and let everything come, and gradually scrape the worm castings to this end, which I can get at slightly easier, as well as underneath having the drain hole, which will have a bucket to catch the worm. Okay, back to it. I've spread the worms around, let the sun shine on them for a bit to dry them down, and scraped all the worm castings, what was left over, basically towards a hollow I'd made. That's been grabbed out, and I got a nice big bucket of, so I think it's about 10 litres there, a couple of gallons of worm castings. There's some juvenile worms and adult worms mixed in, but I don't think those will cause any problems. In fact, they'll do the new soils good. And meanwhile, I've also made a cover out of a couple of layers of weed mat, just to give them a little bit of shade protection. As you can see, it's not completely dark, but it'll keep some of the sun out. And that's just on an old insect frame from a window that I had around, and it covers it quite nicely. I'll put some damp sacking underneath just to keep them moist, especially when it gets a bit warmer. Right, it's only 14th of September down here in South Australia. A few early days of spring. Right, I'm going to use those worm castings on my new wicking beds, and that will also inoculate the soil with some fresh worms as well. A couple of days after settling the worms in their new bath as such, they've been given a worm slushy. An idea from good old RobBob. That's mushed up all leftover greens, bit of protein in there as well, whizzed up in a food processor or Thermomix, and just spread over for them. The little ones just come right underneath it and gobble the lot within a few days, and they love it.